Hi, everyone. Welcome to our podcast, Two Girls, One Crime, where we're going to deep dive into different cases and criminals together. So, since this is our first episode, we're going to start with a little introduction on us, your hosts.
Yeah, so I'm Megan. I have a background in psychology, got my bachelor's in psychology, and then getting my master's in mental health counseling. I grew up in Chicago, Illinois, and now I live in Nashville, Tennessee. So wanted to do this podcast. Emily and I love our crime. We love talking about it.
Yeah.
We love really doing a deep dive into it, and we just wanted to talk a little bit more and have that space for us to share some fun facts and all of our fun little conversations we have about different crime and stuff out there.
Exactly. My name's Emily. I am from Brookline, Massachusetts, which is outside of Boston, and I got my bachelor's in criminology and law studies and psychology as well. And I'm currently doing a paralegal certification program, and so by the end of this month, I'll also be a paralegal.
Look at us go, two educational girlies.
Yep, yep, you know it. And Megan and I went to Marquette together, so that is how we know each other. We've lived together for a few years, and we've had lots of conversations of crime. So we thought we'd share it with all of you.
Definitely one of our fun little conversations. And honestly, this started all because we were playing a crime game, and we just thought, why not start a podcast? Because obviously that's what everybody thinks to do, right?
Exactly. Yes, we love those things where they send you the envelope of all the stuff to solve a crime. We've done 2 of them now, and we solved them both, so I gotta say we did pretty good.
We did do pretty good, and honestly now we get to be able to dissect some of the cases that we talk about daily, and also ones that maybe we don't really necessarily talk about all the time. So
daily.
Our daily things, or even some little conspiracies here and there that we touch on. Just a fun little place to talk about it.
Yes, and if you guys have any people or crimes that you want us to talk about, we definitely will. So let us know. We have a list of ideas of ones that we want to talk about already.
Yeah, very into, big ones out there. But even the ones I feel like that are the underground are always really fun to look at, because you're just like, wait, this is something that everybody should know about, honestly.
Yes, 100%. We're going to start talking about our first topic, which is, take it away, Megan.
Jeffrey Dahmer, the Milwaukee cannibal himself.
Yes.
He obviously is very he's obviously very well known for, killing a lot of people, doing some not great things to them, like cutting them up, all those fun things that we want to talk about. And just diving a little bit deeper, especially since
we'll get into it.
Getting a little into it. We live down the street from where he killed people. So, Emily, if you want to take it away with a little bit of that background.
Yes, let's do it. So, as we said, we live in Milwaukee, and we went to college here at Marquette. Shout out Marquette. And like Megan said, our apartment was just down the road from where his apartment was. So I do want to say we've maybe done a drive-by of where it was. It's not there anymore.
Don't forget Grandma's house as well. We've done a little investigation of Grandma's house on our way to Culver.
Yes, we did indeed do that. That's very Wisconsin, on our way to Culver's. But anywho, a little bit more about his background before he committed his crimes that he committed here in Milwaukee. So he was born here in Milwaukee. He was born on May 21st, 1960. His parents described him as very energetic, very a normal child. He ended up having this hernia surgery, which was painful and traumatic for him, which seemed to be the tipping point of his behavior, and he became very withdrawn and not like himself. So at around age 5, Dahmer and his family moved to Ohio, and as a child he was very into, and he had a big fascination with animal bones and animal bodies and insects, and he would keep them in jars. So at about age 14, he began his interest towards murder, and a lot of people think this might be because of his parents' divorce and the family separating, which could have led him with those fantasies and fascinations and thoughts and actually putting them into real crimes. Also at 14 is when he began drinking, and by the time of his first killing, which we didn't find out till later, at 18 he had a very bad drinking problem. So, like I said, nobody really knew about the killing at 18 until later on. Um, and that was seemingly the only crime that he committed before he ended up moving back to Milwaukee. But this first one was when he lived in Ohio with his family. He ended up picking up a boy who was hitchhiking, and they went back to his parents' house. He got him drunk and ended up killing him because he, quote, didn't want him to leave. He did end up dismembering his body, which is something that we see in a lot of Dahmer's cases moving forwards. He also technically, what everyone knows is that he only had that one victim before moving to Wisconsin, where there are a lot more. I think it was 17 in 13 years, which is insane and horrible.
Well,
Um,
I think it's also really fascinating that there was such like a gap between the time that he murdered his first and
mm-hmm,
his like second, if you will.
mm-hmm,
And I just think it's interesting that
mm-hmm.
like it wasn't necessarily like a oh I there the urge kind of went away, or at least it like was,
Mm-hmm.
I can't think of the word, but
Like subdued,
yeah, it was
if that's
suppressed.
even the word.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
was suppressed
suppressed.
for a while, and I just find that very
Mm-hmm.
interesting as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and like that he wasn't caught back then either, along with a
No,
lot of his wins in Milwaukee.
no, I believe honestly from the and for those of you who have watched it, the Jeffrey Dahmer like documentary on Netflix, or
Mm-hmm.
the recreation or whatever you want to call it, um, I believe he got pulled over after he had murdered that guy, and he
Mm-hmm.
didn't get caught and was just like, "Oh, I'm taking some trash out to some,
Yeah.
place," which is even more insane when you really think about it.
Yeah, and that's something I actually talk about later is that like he was so kind to all the police officers that like they wouldn't expect anything from him, which I
Mhm.
think was something that actually really helped him not get caught, which is scary to think about. But
Definitely, for sure.
okay, moving on to a little more background, and then Megan will talk about the crime itself. So he was enlisted into the army in 1978, but he actually was discharged 3 years later. And once he was discharged, he was returned back to Ohio for about a year, where he was arrested for disorderly conduct, and his father decided to ship him back to Milwaukee to live with his grandma. And so while he was in Wisconsin, he actually got arrested twice more, right when he got back for indecent exposure, and he received a 1 year probationary sentence. So, Megan, take away the crimes that took place in Milwaukee.
Yeah, so I think like a good background, right? Like when you really think about it, what kind of happened next is actually insane and something you
Mm-hmm.
probably never would have expected. Like I
Yeah.
mentioned previously, he was known as and is still known as today as the Milwaukee Cannibal. And
Mm-hmm.
crime in Milwaukee specifically spanned from 1987 to 1991. Um, he moved to Milwaukee, like Emily said, with his grandmother in 1982 after he was discharged from the army. And at the time, none of the killings had started. He was living a normal life. He was working at a chocolate shop downtown and a chocolate factory.
Mm-hmm.
Online, he was working
We've
as
also
well.
driven past where that was.
We have driven past it. We've attended Marquette basketball games at Pfizer
Mm-hmm.
Forum, where it was right next
Yeah.
to the chocolate factory
Yeah.
itself,
Yeah.
which is absolutely insane to think about. And even on top of that, he was working as a phlebotomist at the time at um, a plasma place in Milwaukee area. So he was living a normal
Mm-hmm.
life. And then again, 1987, he started to attend some gay bars. He was bringing men home with him. And usually what would happen is he would start with drugging them at the bars. He would bring them home. He'd sexually abuse them. And continue to do that, and then eventually release them. He would send them home. He'd get them a car, or he would just have them kind of wander off into wherever he was hoping, not really thinking anything of it. Um, First killing in particular in Milwaukee was 1987 with Stephen Tormey. If I'm saying that wrong, I do apologize, but that was at a gay bar. What happened was he took him to the Ambassador Hotel, which is located on Wisconsin Avenue, for those who do know it. Took him to the
Mm-hmm.
hotel room, intoxicated. And he honestly, and this is the craziest part I think about this one in particular, is he does not remember ever killing him. he
Mm-hmm.
remembers waking up and the victim being dead, and just remembers that he was like, sexually abusing him. Not great. Woke
Mm-hmm.
up, and he, from what he found out later, was he ended up strangling him. But even in the times that he's talked about this particular one, he remembers nothing about what happened to him and ended up taking him home, engaging in necrophilia, dismembering the body, and then threw those body parts into trash bags, just like he did to his first victim, and continued this for about a
Mm-hmm.
year. I don't
Mm-hmm.
know in particular how many people um, he took the lives of when he was living at his grandmother's
Mm-hmm.
house. But I do know that this got pretty nasty when he moved into his own apartment in November of 1988, which again was on 25th Street for those of you who dare to go visit the
Just
empty
down the
plot.
road.
Just down the road.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely, it's
Yeah,
very
it's just
eerie.
grass. There's no more apartment building.
No more apartment building. And I don't know if you felt the same, but I felt it was a little eerie just because you could see where the
Yeah.
building used to stand, but there was just nothing there.
Yeah. It's definitely like haunting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very, very
Even in the
scary.
like documentary or the like recreation, I don't know exactly what that was called. Um, like obviously it like they did it in Milwaukee, so you really
Yeah.
are seeing like all the spots that you're seeing every day, like the public bus and all the same street signs and everything. So it's
Hmm.
scary.
It's definitely scary, and I think just like it gives you a little more sense of like how severe this actually was at the time.
Hmm.
So what happened in particular, and we can go into we'll go into a little bit more detail, but proceeded to continue to kill people. But I wanted to highlight a couple of things where he was actually arrested right after he moved into his own apartment. I believe the day after, from what I found, where he met a 13-year-old
Hmm.
boy, drugged the boy. The boy ended up escaping, and he was arrested for sexual assault and put on probation for 5 years. And I think from what Emily was saying earlier, right,
Hmm.
where he had good relationships with the cops, or he would be very friendly towards them. He would have this attitude of like, oh, no, 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 like, you're doing your job, officer, I made a mistake.
Hmm.
um and then he would end up getting away with a lot of things. And even the 5 years probation of sexually assaulting a 13-year-old boy, at the time, times were very different, right? But at the same time, like, he got away with it for a reason.
Yeah. And I was actually going to say something about that later, which I'll touch on now. But like a lot of his victims were young, gay
Mm-hmm.
people of color. So I feel like that also had a big thing to do with it. He was a white man and
Yeah.
he was like close, like the police trusted him over any of his victims. And I think it was two of them like actually like had contact with the police and they like returned this 13-year-old back to Dahmer because they thought that they were in a relationship. And so I feel like it just shows like just how marginalized those groups are and how they really went unnoticed like in a lot of these
Mm-hmm.
scenarios.
Yeah, I agree. I just think like in it again, I obviously you've seen the progress that we've made, and we still have a lot of progress to go in terms of those marginalized groups and like all the crimes related to them. But at the same time, like
Mm-hmm.
at the time, it was just kind of like a you see it, you don't say anything, and it led
Yeah.
unfortunately to the death of a lot of individuals. But
Mm-hmm.
a couple of things just to kind of finish off. Obviously, as
Mm-hmm.
many of you might know, he killed a lot of individuals. I want to say that the number he killed was like 15, but I'm not
Mm-hmm.
100% sure. But the last crime
I
was
think
one of
it was 17,
17. Okay,
but
so he killed
yeah.
17 people over the course of his life.
Mm-hmm.
And the last crime, really, where I wanted to highlight was on July 22nd of 1991. The Milwaukee police caught a man who was stumbling. He was half naked. He had um, one handcuffed, one handcuff on. His name was Tracy Edwards, and he was drugged as well. But he reported that he was threatened with a knife by Jeffrey Dahmer. And
Mm-hmm.
of course, the police officers went to investigate. Jeffrey Dahmer was not with Tracy Edwards at the time, so they went up to his apartment and found a horrific scene of multiple body parts. And the FBI actually described it as a set of a horror movie with how insane that it actually looked within the apartment. Um, Apparently, there was 11 victims' remains found in Dahmer's apartment. He confessed to dozens of murders that include torture and decapitation of victims, both dead and alive at the time. And in 1992, he was charged with killing 15 men over the course of um, however many years he was doing this. And at 1994, he eventually died. But really focusing on the fact that he killed so many people in the span of multiple years. And it's not exactly a decade, but if we want to call it that, we're getting
Mm-hmm.
to that point. And on top of that, I think one thing that, and not to give him the space of like, we should feel sorry, because not at all, but I find it really, really fascinating that he says, in quotes, he didn't want to kill his victims, so he would drink the alcohol to forget that he was killing them.
Mm-hmm.
So he said that what his process would kind of be when it came to these victims and drugging them, bringing them back to his apartment, is he would end up drinking a lot, and he called it was a means to an end, so that he wouldn't remember actually doing anything to them, or he would remember like minimal detail, which whenever I think about it, I find it so fascinating that he knew and there was a
Mm-hmm.
behavior there that he was doing,
Mm-hmm.
because he knew ultimately what he was doing was probably not the best to do.
Yeah, that's and that also just shows his drinking problem as well. Just like
Mm-hmm.
drinking to forget and then committing all these crimes and then not getting caught and then continuing to do it. It's like so scary.
Yeah, and it just is like, how do you kind of go about that? And I also think, right, like
Mm-hmm.
when you look at the addiction side, and we don't even know, like, I feel like you touched on a little bit, Em, in terms of like what that was like, but at the same time,
Mm-hmm.
like, he was doing something, he knew that it was a problem. He also got like or honorably discharged or whatever it was from the army due
Mm-hmm.
to a drinking problem, and there was still really
Yeah.
no addressing of like, oh well, maybe there's that addiction that's there, let's figure it out. It was just kind of like, oh, you did this, you gotta be kicked out of the house and moved on to the next step.
Yeah, there was no like sense of help or anything like that from I feel like his family. They were just like, okay, on to the next spot to see if that helps or fixes anything.
For sure. And I think, like, of course, I'm sure looking back on it, they were probably like, well, maybe that wasn't the best decision, but at the same time,
Right.
like, I believe he was in his late 20s or his mid 20s. And
Mm-hmm.
what do you do when your kid is continuously drinking and just doing nothing? Like, there's
Yeah.
a point where they probably were fed up at the time and just like, this is probably the best place for you.
Yeah. And there's honestly only so much you can do before someone like actually wants to do it themselves versus like just people telling them what to do. So I think that had a part of it, but also so scary.
It's so scary. And I think just like, even, and we can get into this a little bit before we dive a little bit deeper into kind of our thoughts, but some quotes that I found
Mm-hmm.
that I feel like really encompass who he was. And Em and I have talked about this obviously off the podcast, but like
Mm-hmm.
who he was as just a serial killer, a criminal, whatever you want to call it, so
Mm-hmm.
fascinating compared to other criminals, because he would always admit what he did. It was never this
Mm-hmm.
like denial of, oh, I never killed anybody, like some other infamous versus non-infamous as well serial killers out
Mm-hmm.
there. It was always this like, nope, like I confessed to doing that. And he even put on there like some things that he talked about in regard to like being interviewed. Specifically, it was called like The Confessions of a Killer. It's a Netflix documentary.
Mm-hmm.
Em and I have watched it a couple of times. It's
Yep.
fantastic. But
Mm-hmm.
he has said, I had these obsessive desires and thoughts, wanting to control them, to possess them permanently. Like, he's very
Mm-hmm.
aware of what was going through his head at the time. I'm curious, I'm like, what do you think
Yeah.
about that?
Yeah, I think it is like it's definitely scary, like we've said a bunch of times.
Mm-hmm.
But it is so crazy because it is so different to a lot of others who are trying to hide what they did or trying to, I don't know, just like
Yeah.
disconnect from their crimes. And he just really is like very like I had these thoughts and desires. I wanted to do this and I did do this. So
Mm-hmm.
it is very it really kind of I think shows more of who he is like deep down, and I think we're going to get into this as well, but just like childhood trauma
Oh my
has
God, yeah.
turned him into
So
like
Yeah, honestly, so much. And I'm sure when we really start to think about it, there's so much more than just that basic, like, oh, like parent divorce. And like M touched on,
Yeah.
he was so into like killing animals and like looking at their bones.
Yeah.
Like, that's in itself kind of
And
like,
keeping them like while they were dead and
yeah,
dismembering them and keeping them in jars and yeah.
yeah, and
That's not
continued.
normal kid behavior. I didn't
No.
do that. I hope you didn't do that either.
I hope I didn't do that. I hope my parents would have told me if I did that. But one
Yeah.
more thing I wanted to just like touch on with what he alluded to with these crimes is he always said that
Yeah.
killing was never the intent. Like how he described it, and I'm hoping that I'm saying this right, and again, not giving him a platform, but kind of just diving into that mindset of what he was like, was
Mhm.
he called it the least satisfactory part, again touching on how he drank the alcohol so he wouldn't remember, and all he wanted was, and what
Mhm.
he said was, he wanted these love slaves, and he said, I just wanted to have the person under my complete control and not having to consider their wishes, being able to keep them there as long as I wanted. Um, I wanted to find out what it was that caused me to be so evil and bad. So again, that awareness there of like, what I'm doing is wrong. I shouldn't be doing it.
Mhm.
And I'm going to continue to do it because it's something that I want for myself, for that like personal gratification, is kind of how he made it sound like. So I just think that out of
Yeah.
all the crimes that we will talk about and that we've talked
Mhm.
about independently, it's like
Mhm.
crazy to think that he like he knew what he was doing was wrong and continued to do it, was like, well,
Mhm.
this is why I did it. Like, it's kind of like an A, B, and C, and he sees that, which
Yeah.
is insane.
Which is so crazy.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, okay, should we go into like the criminology and psych part?
Do we want to do like what it was like in Milwaukee at that point?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Wait, I'm
Okay.
sorry, I didn't see that part.
Oh my God, no,
Okay,
you're
we'll
fine.
edit this.
It's kind of all, but okay. So now that we've kind of talked about just like that crime, some past history there, we thought it was really important to just dive into like what Milwaukee looked like at the time, because
Hmm.
like Emily touched on, a lot of his victims were a part of the LGBTQA plus community. A lot of them were in minority cultures, so there's a lot there to kind of dissect. But again, like Emily mentioned, just previously laying out like what his victims represented it in terms of ethnicity. During between 1987 and 1991, Dahmer was involved in the deaths of Black, Indigenous, Asian, and Latino men and boys. So really focusing on that male presence, but also again really important to highlight that it was those minority cultures. And
Hmm.
whether or not some of you know that, Milwaukee is the most segregated city in the country. So there is a lot of that presence where we, the minoritized individuals, are very separate from maybe the Caucasian or white population. And there's a lot of
Hmm.
attention. And I would say, even to this day, from Emily and I going to school here for 4 years, seeing that on our everyday campus and even noticing the presence of where maybe Milwaukee police leaned their attention towards and were maybe a little bit more discriminatory compared to just looking at what is going on in Milwaukee as a whole. And I don't know, like if you at all kind of noticed that as well.
Yeah, I was actually going to say something similar later on where it's just like if we see it like that now and we've noticed that now, it's just scary to think like X amount of years ago how much worse it probably was as well. If
Mm-hmm.
especially like you said, like even like Marquette police, like we see them in certain areas, in Milwaukee police, we see them in certain areas. So it's just we still have a long way to go. Even though
For
we have made progress, we still have a long way to go.
For sure. And I feel like with that in particular, it's crazy because, like you said, even now we still see them roaming around maybe Marquette's campus or even where Em and I currently reside, right? We can see the disparity there. And even at this time, like there wasn't then a movement in terms of the LGBTQ plus, and I would say the majority of men that he took into his possession, he found at gay bars. He met at the LGBTQ community spaces or gay bars and would drug them. So not only
Mhm.
was it the minoritized population, but it was also this group of individuals where there was not a lot of advocating for, let's create these spaces where we're all together, and also let's not discriminate against this population. So kind of picking
Yeah.
that, don't necessarily know why he decided to go with those particular populations, but I know that there's a lot of discussion about how he might have known deep down that police individuals weren't necessarily so focused in on those minoritized populations, and that's why he kind of chose them as his subjects.
Yeah. Yeah. Just horrible.
Definitely, it's heartbreaking to see, but I think it's just a good reminder of also like where we're at. But at the time, um, just talking about in terms of like where we were at was during this time, police violence. There was a lot of indifferences in urban centers throughout the Midwest and Rust Belt, where again, just a lot of conflict there around this time, like during this transition, there was a lot of police brutality across the country as well within minoritized groups, specifically African Americans. And in addition, Milwaukee saw a massive, extremely massive increase in these communities, specifically the LGBTQ community after World War II, which I found interesting. I didn't really know necessarily why, but
Yeah, I
it
didn't know
was, yeah, it's definitely something that it just increased and there wasn't really a reason. I believe that there was already a pretty small community of that LGBTQ in the area, and then after it, it kind of became like an accepting place to continue to venture off
that.
to and encouraged that community build because it was just something that was here, maybe not necessarily protected by the Milwaukee community, but it was
Hmm.
here. So I found that just really
Yeah.
fascinating and something to touch on, especially because I feel like it gives a lot more context and kind of what
Hmm.
might have been going through his head at the time.
Yeah. It is like also sad because like those people probably attended those bars or those safe
Hmm.
spots because they were safe spots, and then he came in and targeted just those individuals. So that is also
Yeah.
just heartbreaking as well.
Yeah, it's crazy. And I think it's even crazier that to this day, some of those bars are still open. Like, I don't know
Hmm.
what it's called in particular, but I know there is one gay bar that is still open that he went to in order to like seduce and to drug victims. So I find that
Hmm.
super interesting. But I
Yeah,
know,
I feel like that maybe shouldn't, those maybe shouldn't be open anymore.
no, or at least,
Not the specific ones he was at.
yeah,
Like
or maybe just
other
kind
ones fine, but not
yeah.
where he was.
No, or at least just kind of being like, hey, how can we increase that security? Hoping that individuals who do go there are feeling a little bit more safe and loved
Yes.
and protected and
Yes.
all those things. Hopefully, we will not have another one of these Jeffrey Dahmer cases. It's been 30
No.
years, 40 years, something of that nature.
Hmm.
Um, Probably less than that, but I just horrible at
We weren't
math.
alive then. We don't know.
We weren't alive then, and on top of that, why are we psychology and criminology majors that have nothing to do with
Yeah.
math for the most part? But
I had
kind
to
of,
take one stats class, and it was social
I
statistics.
also had to
So
take a
that
stats
just really
class.
shows you.
Yeah, I also had to take a stats class, and to this day, I still don't really understand what I was learning. But besides the point, Emily and I are going to do a little deep dive kind of into our backgrounds and what we've talked about with this case. And I wanted to throw it over to Em because I've done a lot of talking. And on top of that, I feel like the criminology behind this one is so incredibly fascinating.
Yeah, and a lot of what I'm about to say we actually already touched on, but I will do it all again. So, we the criminology side of it is very interesting because I find it so intriguing and puzzling about why it took the police so long to find out what he was doing, which we talked about. And I they just didn't have a suspect for a while. A lot of the crimes weren't actually connected. They were seen as like individual ones. And obviously back in 1991 and beyond and before, there was no social media or anything like that, obviously like other than the news or newspapers. But I do think if this had happened today, and we've seen this with a lot of crimes that are happening recently. We see them posted all over the media. Like, people on TikTok are going crazy, like finding descriptions, pictures, the victims' names, all of that. And I think that has a big thing to do with it. And like we said, there he really was very cooperative with the police. He was very
Mm-hmm.
kind to them. He was a white man. He was committing these crimes in private, and there was just a lack of connection between all the cases and victims, which made it super hard. And I think, again, if this had happened today, there are a lot more databases and ways to connect all these crimes between different cities or places or states so much easier than obviously back then.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was just hard for them to connect it all back to him. Obviously, once you start to see serial killer traits where you see obviously the same like ways people are getting killed and same everything like
Mm-hmm.
that, obviously it's easier to connect. But when they're kind of sporadic and happening, like at the beginning, it wasn't happening as often, so it's hard to connect those all together. And like we said, again, a lot of his victims were young gay people of color who are marginalized groups, and so they just didn't receive the same urgency or attention if they were found missing or dead or seen on the street.
Mm-hmm.
Um, they just were often unnoticed or overlooked, um, which is just scary. And it also just shows, like, I feel like today's day and age, like, if something happens, like, you see it everywhere you look, Instagram,
Mm-hmm.
TikTok, all over the news. Like, people are searching, like,
Think about like Nancy
we see that so
Guthrie.
much now.
She's like everywhere
Exactly.
on the news, even though her child is someone
Yeah.
who's famous. Like you see it everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah. And people are like looking, people are sending stuff into the police. Like, it's just, it is crazy how much of a difference, however many years, if we could do the math, makes, and just like how all of these people were just overlooked and he caught. I'm forgetting
Arrested?
my words. Yeah, I guess just like he wasn't arrested until that one guy, I think you said his name was Tracy Edwards, right?
Yeah, Tracy
He like
Edwards.
and so many people came before him and tried to do the same, even the 13-year-old. Like, it's just hard to think about and especially connect now and then and
Hmm.
just be like, oh well, like now it would have been so much easier to connect them all, but like really would it have been? And so it's hard to think of like the what ifs in the situation, but I think it
Yeah.
just makes a big difference.
Yeah, and I really like I think also like you already said this, but like how it's not the same where if someone goes missing, it's like, oh, well, you can't just call them. It was kind of like, well, they're doing
Hmm.
their own thing, they're off the grid, and like, of course, there were phones and such, but it wasn't like I have my phone next to me, but like a cell phone in my pocket where I could just whip it out and
Right.
call you if I'm not there.
Right. And like even nowadays, like we all share our locations with each other, like to be
Yeah.
safe. And obviously they didn't have that then. So it's like, oh, if I'm like, oh, I haven't heard from Megan in a while, and like
Mhm.
I look at your location and you're somewhere random, I would be like, what is she? What's happened? Like, is she
Yeah.
okay? So I think that also, there was, it's just so different than now.
No, for sure. I definitely it's crazy to think about, but I think it's also interesting when you think about like all the crimes that are happening today. Like there
Hmm.
is a lot more ability to kind of solve those things, and you even touched on all the databases and all the police things that they
Hmm.
have the capacity to do now compared to like,
Yeah.
you know, like 30 years ago where that just wasn't a thing.
Yeah. And I also feel like we see that a lot in like any type of case that's across state borders in any way. Like, I feel like now it's so much easier for police or FBI of different states to then help with crimes in other states too, which obviously they could do back then. But I do feel like it's a lot easier now to have a bunch of different places come together and work on something versus
Mhm.
back then where that just would have been, I feel like just would have taken a certain amount of time longer, and now it's just more efficient.
Yeah, I feel like we're kind of like the, even though we weren't even alive, we're like, oh, back in the day, like this would have been so much more
Right.
difficult. That's what I feel like this conversation has turned into, which,
Yeah.
hey, what can you do?
Yes.
Well, I guess kind of with that, right? Like there's a criminology background, and then there's also like the diagnosis and psychiatric side. And I want to preface, like,
Yeah.
I do not know anything about Jeffrey Dahmer. if we want to call it a legal disclaimer, go right ahead. I do not know who he
Yeah.
is. This is all based on research. This is all based on kind of my own opinion, but not really
Yeah.
because I Googled and I also used
Yeah.
my hefty little diagnosis book. But, anyways,
Yeah.
uh,
Oh yeah.
oh yeah, I just want to throw that out there if anyone listening is like,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
these girls, what is going on? So with the diagnosis and psychiatric side, I think that with Jeffrey Dahmer, he's a very interesting case when it comes to this. So there's a couple
Hmm.
things in there that I wanted to touch on where it's that like paraphernalia and necrophilia. So it's that fascination with naked individuals, but also like the fascination with
Hmm.
like dead bodies and doing things to them. That is a thing.
Hmm.
It's not a diagnosable thing, but it's like a fetish, if that makes sense. And there's also
Yeah.
that diagnosis of alcoholism in there that Em and I both touched on. That
Yeah.
apparently when he met with the psychiatrist in court, because at the time of actual the actual trial, he was trying to
Hmm.
make the plea that he did this as he was deemed psychologically insane and that ultimately he was charged to be sane with the crimes. But at the time, he was diagnosed with alcoholism, paraphernalia, necrophilia,
Hmm.
that sort of thing. There was a couple things in there that I think are interesting to touch on is antisocial personality disorder, which personality
Hmm.
disorders, if you know them, very fun. A lot of it has to go with like lack of relationships,
Hmm.
really kind of just living in your own sort of world, that sort of thing, having not really that ability for a lot of times to make those connections with people. But there was also some hints in there of that obsession and compulsive and sadistic components, like we talked about earlier, where he mentioned how he was obsessed and had thoughts and desires of wanting to control them. Um, I I found this interesting. He was not diagnosed with a sexual disorder. He was just
Hmm.
diagnosed with an unspecified sexual disorder, which didn't do a lot of detail. And I think a big reason as to why there wasn't a lot of detail, specifically in the court records, was because they didn't really have a case. And on top of that,
Yeah.
they're wanting to try to make it as like vague as possible to give him his best
Hmm.
shot. So who knows? But
I
it
also think
was.
that even now, like a lot of like things have just been so there's so many more like what's the word? Just like options of things to be diagnosed with, which is
Mm-hmm.
the word is not options, but it's like I feel like there's a lot more like specific things
Mm-hmm.
that maybe now he could be diagnosed with, but again, back in the day,
For
like I don't know,
sure.
I feel like that is ever changing as well,
Yeah, I
which could have a
definitely.
part of it.
No, I think definitely that's a huge part of it. Like, I think a great example of that is like autism is a big one. Like, a lot of people
Hmm.
suspected that there was like an autism component in there, and that was a part of it. But a lot of people stray away from it because obviously then that puts a lot of stigma on the individuals who are diagnosed with autism, and it doesn't
Right.
necessarily look good to be like this guy who killed a lot of people have this diagnosis as well. So definitely there's a lot that goes
Exactly.
into there, and they're dealing with so much information at the time. They're trying to get this guy
Mhm.
into a prison system or trying to free him, whatever each side was trying to do at the time. So a lot of that there. But again, wanting to preface that the psychiatrist himself said not a sexual fetish. Um, he was engaged and he was interested. He was like interested in the sexual fetish, but it wasn't like always. I'm probably saying this wrong. What does it say? Not a sexual fetish, since hoarding was not his main goal. So there's some things in there where it wasn't necessarily a true sexual fetish, but he's also hoarding the body parts. So
Hmm.
there's a little bit of that in there where there was some confusion. He did
And
experience
we heard that when he got eventually caught, like he had what 11 victims' bodies
11
in his
bodies
apartment
in his
still.
apartment. So there's that
I
hoarding
just remember in
component.
the show exactly when they opened the freezer and it was just like, oh, like I will never get that image out of my head. So
No,
that
to
definitely is a part 11 people.
11 people, and
Yeah.
it's like he had them everywhere. Like some of the things I was
Yeah.
reading was like he literally had bodies stacked in his shower because he had no place to put them, which I think is so crazy when you really think about it. Oh,
Yeah.
but
That's
that's
if
why
you
we
don't
talk
have
about
anywhere to
it.
put them, I would say maybe stop.
I
stop
would
doing
agree
it.
with that, but it's Jeffrey Dahmer. He decided not to do that,
Right,
and look at what happened to him. But there was
right.
also some interesting things in there where he experienced delusions, which he would become a satanic god, like he was in his favorite movies or videos, which I don't think is touched on enough because there's a lot of diagnoses out there, and I won't throw them out here because I
Hmm.
don't have a lot of information in front of me, but
Hmm.
where you can experience these delusions, and he would pretend to be like these music video creatures or like movie videos, and he would like be the ultimate person, which I just found that to be bizarre but very interesting.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, definitely
yeah,
bizarre.
and you touched on this earlier, but he had a traumatic brain injury, correct?
Hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
he had, well, no, it didn't say his brain. It said that he had a traumatic hernia surgery, which I don't know how that would then turn into was all of this, but a lot of things that I read and watched even said that just the recovery from that was so traumatic and just devastating that then he just was a completely different person.
Okay, well, there was something I saw by this author who did this research on serial killers, and it's Claire S. Ellie, and I wanted to give her the credit, but she talked about autism and spectrum disorders and neurodevelopmental disorders, or even a head injury can impact, which I don't
Mm-hmm.
believe, like you said, he didn't have, but I thought that was
Mm-hmm.
interesting to kind of like bring up of there is research kind of being like, well, this could indicate maybe why there wasn't as much like sympathy or empathy for the individuals he was killing. But at the
Yeah.
same time, when you really think about it, he was doing something so he wouldn't have to feel when he was harming and dismembering these individuals. So who really knows?
Right.
But I just found that to be
And
fascinating.
yeah, and I was gonna say, like, again, we did mention like how he was drinking a lot of the time, so who knows, maybe there was some type of head injury in there that he clearly doesn't remember. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so that could even be part of it too.
That's a good point as well. I feel like it definitely is interesting when you kind of put all these pieces together. And again, there's so much information. I feel like we could do like a
Hmm.
10-hour podcast dissecting every little
Right.
bit of his childhood. For our viewers or listeners, whatever you're listening to us on, I feel like
Hmm.
there are so many documentaries out there where I would be interested if
Hmm.
others found information or like found something that we didn't
Hmm.
necessarily mention because I would love to hear about it.
Yeah. Hmm.
But
Yeah,
so
that 100%. And if you guys have any suggestions of who we should talk about in the future, also.
yeah, for sure. We love that. So I think just to kind of end, there were a couple of things that we wanted to touch on, and we just thought it would be interesting to go over a couple like frequently asked questions that we both have wondered ourselves as well as kind of looked at online to just look at like Reddit threads and stuff and just look at little interesting factoids if you want to call it.
Yeah, yeah. I found a few, and I know you found a few also,
Hmm.
but obviously we have watched everything and read everything, but I hadn't for a little while, so I was trying to come up with some questions before just being like, did anyone escape from him and like still alive? Which we talked about Tracy Edwards um, escaping from him, and then there was one other named Ronald Flowers who also escaped from him. I need to do a further deep dive on Ronald Flowers and who that is, but we learned that two people actually did escape from him. Unfortunately,
Maybe
the rest.
maybe Ronald Flowers was the guy, the little boy who he was
You're
sexually
all.
assaulted. Yeah, I don't think they named a
That's what I
name.
was wondering.
Yeah, it could 100% be
Hmm.
that, but it's good, a horrible turn of events, but honestly, like giving shout out to Tracy Edwards for honestly being like the hero in all of this, and honestly, like
Yeah, yeah,
getting him convicted because if he didn't escape, this
yeah,
probably would have continued for years.
yeah. There would have been so many more, which is
Hmm.
horrible. Another one was how long was he sentenced for? Obviously, and another one was how did he die? So obviously, we know that he was killed in his correctional facility in 1991. But originally, when he was first sentenced, he got 16 life sentences, which is equal to 957 years. So he did get killed, but he would not have survived obviously
That's crazy.
957 years.
Yeah,
So,
let's hope
but that
not.
is like crazy. Obviously, 16 life sentences, but like that is so many years. When you really think about it, it's like he killed 16 people. Like it's so crazy.
It's absolutely
Gives me the
insane.
shivers.
A little bit of moment of silence
Yeah.
for that
Yes.
reflection there.
Yes. Yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
like a lot of people asked about how he died, which I think was super interesting in terms of how he died. Well, first of all, he wanted to die. I don't think
Yeah.
we talk about that enough, is how he was like,
Mhm.
after he got convicted, he was totally fine with someone harming him or him not
Yeah.
surviving because
Yeah.
he reported that he felt sorry for what he did.
Hmm. Yeah. And it said that he was killed by a former inmate, which I was kind of touching on that. I was wondering like did he ask him to do something, or was he like we just don't know where, obviously, where his head was at all, clearly.
Yeah.
Um, but that was something I thought about, which I'm not sure.
Yeah, well, I think there was something that I also saw online where it was like this Christopher Scarver, is that how you said it?
Hmm.
Scarver?
I think
He
so. Yeah.
he reported that Jeffrey Dahmer was like taunting inmates. And this I found to be so
Hmm.
disturbing was he would pretend like his food was human limbs and he was eating them and absolutely disgusting. But I also think that's so interesting because he's sitting on camera telling us how he's so remorseful for everything he did, but
Right.
then he turns back around and he's like, well, I was, he's doing this in a prison, but who knows? Like I'm said, maybe he was doing this because he felt so bad and he just was like, yeah, I just want to get killed, see what happens, that sort of thing. But who truly knows, right?
We never will, which is also the crazy part too.
Yeah. So I think
Terrible.
yeah, horrible. I think it's important to know a couple of things that were also asked. Like we talked about those psychological traits where he did have that lack of empathy, desire to
Hmm.
control, and it's like psychopathic traits. Em touched on this a little
Hmm.
bit earlier, but Dahmer was exposed to um, early violence, alcohol abuse, as well as isolation from others. I don't know if you
Hmm.
want to touch on that a little bit more.
Yeah, I think, I mean, I truly don't know a lot. Obviously, nobody really knows a lot underneath the surface of what his childhood was like, besides what we read or see in documentaries slash the recreation. Um, but that can like take such a toll on somebody's, first of all, mental health, and again, like you were talking about, all the psychological side of things. Like it, something happening to you at such a young age can really control how you live the rest of your life. And so I
Mm-hmm.
think that for sure, isolation, which also we see that like when he moved out of his grandmother's house, like he was alone, and that's where he committed all of those crimes. Same with the alcohol abuse, we see that a lot. Obviously, he even said that he was drinking to not remember what he
Yeah.
was doing. So I think that it's just they have a huge impact on someone's behavior, and especially criminal behavior in his case.
Yeah.
Um, so, mhm.
Yeah, 100%. And it's like Em said, we truly will never know, but our kind of final question
Mhm.
that we ourselves are curious about to this day, and also a lot of people have asked is like, why did he commit these murders? And he even said, and I wanted to give
Mhm.
a direct quote because I don't want to come up with a reason. So he was on an
Yeah.
interview with Nancy Glass in 1993. And he said, it's still
Mhm.
a mystery to me. I have no idea why I started getting the fantasies and thoughts when I was about 16. That's when it started to kick in. The person to blame is sitting right across from you. It's the only person, not parents, not society, not pornography. I mean, those are just excuses. Um, so I feel like that quote, it it gives me a little bit of pause. It gives me a little bit of perspective, and I just think
Mhm.
that obviously to this day he might not even know. Maybe he does. Maybe he this is where that psychopathic trait comes in of him manipulating us
Mhm.
and trying to be like, "Oh, well, I'm a good guy. I didn't know. I just did it because of blah blah blah."
Mhm.
But this kind of gives me the impression of he's like, nope, don't blame anyone else, blame me. And on top of that, I still don't know why I did what I did.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's just like, again, like I feel like I was saying earlier, how you can only do so much to help someone else without them actually wanting it themselves. So I do
Mm-hmm.
feel like that kind of has a role to play where, like, of course, nothing's like solely his parents' fault, solely society's fault, solely this person's fault. Like, everything just has to connect together. And I think the pieces just connected not in a great way for him.
No, and it's like I like we do not condone anything he did. We talk about it exclusively because we find it so fascinating and we think it
Mm-hmm.
is something that we just want to educate others on of like these are things that are real and that exist and that it's a passion for us to kind of dissect these things but just kind of being like this is
Mm-hmm.
what it is and just being mindful of like he obviously did not go the direction he was hoping for and he got what he got in the end and that's
Mm-hmm.
all we can really do.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting for us coming from criminology and psychology backgrounds just to like see things that we've learned about in classes and everything like that, like, and then apply it to like a real life scenario or a real life case that happened or something like that. So I think that's also kind of a reason we wanted to start this podcast, was because we talk about this a lot, like me and
Yeah.
Megan, we do, and we like love to watch documentaries and talk about them. And so I feel like we kind of want to share our thoughts, but also like introduce you guys to some that maybe you wouldn't know or aren't as mainstream. Um, yeah.
And with
Yeah.
that being said, that is the end of our first official podcast. Some claps for us. Woo!
Yes.
We will be back next week with a new topic. But just appreciate you all
Mm-hmm.
listening. Again, like Emily said, make sure to give us some comments, some suggestions of ones that you would like to hear a deep dive in. Any
Yes.
questions that you're wondering that
Yes.
we can look up and we can kind of do a deep dive in for you.
Mhm.
Appreciate you listening. Emily,
Thanks for watching.
thanks for
Yes,
watching, and
we appreciate you guys, and we're excited to continue to do this.
we're very
And yeah,
excited.
find all these cases, even ones that we haven't heard of yet, and deep dive into those. So we
For
appreciate you
sure.
guys listening, watching, tuning in, all the jazz, and see you next week.
See you next week. Bye.